Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it's a privilege to rise in this House and to speak to this piece of legislation. And I'd like to start today by saying a few words about how this bill is structured. And then I plan to use the majority of my remaining time to discuss the implications of this legislation insofar as personal privacy rights. I look at this bill and my initial response is this: should there really not be three separate pieces of legislation? One dealing with the Consumer Privacy Protection Act and issues related to modernizing PIPEDA, perhaps a second separate piece creating the proposed Personal Information and Data Protection Tribunal Act, and a third component, and a separate really bill should be what absolutely be on its own is legislation, the section dealing with artificial intelligence. AI may present similar, very legitimate concerns related to privacy, but regulation of AI in any practical sense is almost impossible at this juncture because so many aspects of it are still very unknown. So much is still theoretical. So much of this new world into which we are venturing with AI has yet to be fully explored, fully realized, or even fully defined. And this makes regulation very difficult. And here we are, it's in this bill, and so it forms part of this legislation. And we can see just how vague the language related to the AI framework really is. And I understand why it is that way. And don't get me wrong, I think we need this type of legislation to regulate AI. But in the same way, I think that this is way too big a topic to delve into a simple 10-minute speech. It's also too big a topic to drop into an existing piece of legislation as the government has done here, basically wedging this section into what was previously known as Bill C-27 in the last Parliament. I will say I have deep concerns with AI. Practical concerns, economic concerns, labor concerns related to the implementation of AI, and even moral concerns. You know, we have artificial intelligence so advanced it can make decisions by itself, and the people who have created that technology can't explain how it came to those decisions. Can't tell them. The capabilities of this technology alone seem almost limitless. It's actually a little scary. Personally, I look at some of the work being done in AI and I wonder, should we as humanity really be doing this? Just because we have the knowledge and the capability to do something, does it necessarily mean it's for the betterment of humanity? And I wonder sometimes just where this technology, these capabilities will take us. And I fear, in hindsight, we'll look back and we'll see how our hubris led us to a technological and cultural reality that we never wanted and from which we will never be able to return. But here we are, and we're going to have this capability. We have it partially here today, People are using it, and it requires some form of regulation. And this bill attempts to start the important conversation. It's a good first step, and that's okay. I think this is one of those things where we need to start somewhere, and we're not going to get it all done all at once. But again, given the enormity of the topic and the vast implications, it should be its own separate piece of legislation. So those are my thoughts on the structure of the bill. And now I would like to shift gears, Madam Speaker, to talk a little bit about personal privacy. Personal privacy is a fundamental right. 3 decades ago, long before the advent of internet or smartphones, the Supreme Court of Canada ruled privacy is the heart of liberty in a modern state. It didn't say that privacy was at the heart, it said privacy is the heart. Personal privacy is the fundamental right and freedom from which all other liberties flow. And with the advent of the internet age, the age of the smartphone, the age of digitized everything, laws related to protecting that fundamental right to privacy must be updated. Canadians must have the right to access and control the collection, the use, the monitoring, the retention, and the disclosure of their personal data. The question is, how do we realistically do that? You know, one of the reasons I'm a conservative is I believe in individual rights, and that rights and freedoms must be coupled with accompanying accountability and responsibility. This has got to be a two-way street. Canadians need to be informed. They need to be responsible and aware of what they are agreeing to, subscribing to, and giving permission for. How often, Madam Speaker, do we simply and blindly just click accept without actually reading the terms and conditions for using a website, using an app, or allowing others the use of our information. I'd be curious to know among my colleagues here in this House, when was the last time that they fully read the terms and conditions of a user agreement or a disclosure statement? Most of us just hit accept. We don't want to be bothered. So, recognizing this, can we really say that the privacy of Canadians is being violated when many individuals live every moment of their life posting in real time online for all the world to see and access, just click and just click accept without reading what they're agreeing to? So, in this context, what is the role of government and what is the responsibility of the individual user? Government and businesses need to provide clear information, but people also need to be informed. They need to take responsibility. I recall a while back my office received an email on the subject of privacy. The individual was deeply concerned about web giants having access to his personal data, and I had to laugh because at the bottom of the email it said, "Sent from my Huawei phone." As government creating legislation, where should those legal lines between consent and informed consent be drawn? I think as Canadians we're much too quick to consent. But we've also seen far too many examples of Canadians' private and mobility data being used without their consent. We've heard about the Tim Hortons app that was tracking the movement of Canadians. How the RCMP was using Clearview AI's illegally created facial recognition database. Or the public doxing of all those who donated to the Freedom Convoy. TELUS giving location data to the Public Health Agency of Canada without a judicial warrant. And in my view, the most egregious violation of privacy in generations, the requirement by this government and others for Canadians to provide their personal health data and information in order to be able to work and or travel. And if I'm honest, it's this it's this violation of privacy rights that makes me truly hesitant to support any effort by this government to strengthen privacy rights. One, because they so flagrantly violated them, but also because I and many Canadians, a growing number of Canadians actually, just plain don't trust this government. Don't trust them to keep their word. Don't trust them to create legislation that doesn't have loopholes and backdoors that will give them the capability to violate individual personal freedoms. Why? Why do I think that, Madam Speaker? It's because we've seen it from these Liberals. They want to control everything. There has never been a government that has such an utter disregard for Canadians. I've noted before that it was the Prime Minister's father who famously said that the government has no place in the bedrooms of Canadians. But this particular government not only wants to be in your bedroom, they want to be in every room and on every device and on every conversation and in every thought. They want to control what Canadians think, what they see, and what they post, and by extension, I can safely say how their private data is curated and used. One thing that is vital, if we are to trust this government with our private data, with protecting privacy, there must be clear boundaries. This leads to one of the larger issues with this legislation. It's an issue that we face every time this government brings legislation forward, and that is that they fail to provide clear definitions. There's a section of the bill that deals with sensitive information of minors. The fact that there's no section for the protection of sensitive information for adults is aside, but what do they mean by sensitive? It's never defined. What does it mean? What do they mean by scrutiny for data brokers? It's this habitual lack of specificity that characterizes so much of this government's legislation. They're like a band that's way more interested in the concept of the album and how they look on the cover than the actual quality of their music. If they cared about the quality of the music, they'd have brought forward a bill that looks more like the European Union's 2016 GDPR, widely regarded as the gold standard for digital protection. By that standard, PIPEDA fails the test, but so might Bill C-27. We don't bring it closer in line with what other nations have done. This lagging behind, by the way, doesn't just affect personal privacy, but the ability of Canada and data-driven Canadian businesses to work with our EU friends. And in fact, and Madam Speaker, I can see I'm quickly running out of my time, so I'll quickly finish up here. This whole new regime outlined in the bill has huge implications for businesses, something I'm sure my colleagues will be addressing. There's so much that can and should be said about this legislation, but it comes down to this. Canadians must have the right to access and control the collection, the use, the monitoring, retention, disclosure of their personal data. Thank you, Madam Speaker.